hell is this? Oh my god, it's Ludwig. What?
Good hunter, have you seen the thread of light? Just a hair, a fleeting thing. Yet I clung to it, steeped as I was in the stench of blood and beasts. I never wanted to know what it really was. Really, I didn't.
What does it give me? Yeah! Holy mother of fucking Moonlight swords. Well, let's go upgrade the shit out of that. Oh my god, I can't wait to use this. Hey there everyone. Welcome back to the Old Hunters DLC for Bloodborne. Now, last time we left off defeating Ludwig and getting the Moonlight Greatsword, or the Holy Moonlight Sword as it's referred to in this game. So, to start off this episode, we're just going to go through and upgrade that because I really wanted to see how well it would do against the enemies on New Game Plus. I mean, it's an arcane-based weapon along with strength, but I only had about 26 arcane on this character file, and I don't think that was enough to unleash its full potential and to show you guys how much damage it can actually do. To wield this weapon properly, or to at least have a good build and do mediocre to great damage with it, within that range, I'm kind of doing low damage with it when you'll see me defeat some enemies, but to do the most with this weapon, you should have about 35 to 50 arcane, and that way you can almost outclass Ludwig's Holy Blade in terms of damage, if the enemy is weak to arcane, that is. If they have a resistance to arcane, yeah, it'll do less, because if you just had Ludwig's Holy Blade, it'd just be straight damage with strength, but if they have a weakness against arcane, you'll do even more, but if they have a resistance to arcane, then it'll kind of pale in comparison a little bit to Ludwig's Holy Blade. And also, I know that I've missed a few items already in the DLC, but remember that this is a blind playthrough, and then also at the end, when I finish most of the bosses and most of the content, I will go back and I will find all those items I missed, all that dialogue I missed, hopefully, and then that way I can at least complete 99% of the content within the DLC and collect as many things as I can. As for what this episode will cover, we're going to go into a bit more of the lore, seeing as this is post-commentary, and I lost all of the Session 2 files in Audacity for the live commentary, which was a pain in the ass because, well, I don't mind doing post-commentary, but it just takes a lot longer to get the episodes done. And this episode being an hour, the post-commentary will probably take about 3 times as long to do that, because I have to write it all, or I have to write the pieces of lore that I'll go through and what I'm going to say about that. And basically that has to be at least somewhat scripted, and then in turn I have to make sure that I don't make mistakes or I have redundancies in my commentary, so it just all has to be like double checked and proofread and what have you, and because of that it takes so much longer to do. So anyway, while we're still in the hunter's dream and just messing around, upgrading a few things and whatever, let's have a bit of a chat about Ludwig, or Ludwig, whichever one you prefer. I don't really mind because it has 2 pronunciations. But yeah, we have discovered a lot more about Ludwig. If you don't know the basics about him, he was the first Healing Church hunter trained by German, so he kind of led the pack of the Healing Church hunters in trying to contain the Scourge of the Beast when it first broke out in the newly built Yharnam. Ludwig was the most profound Healing Church hunter of them all, not just because he came first, but also because he possessed something that none of the others did, and that came in the form of his Holy Moonlight Sword. It's unclear how Ludwig discovered the Holy Moonlight Sword, but the one thing that is evident is that he tried to keep it as secretive as possible from everyone else, because the Yharnamite hunters, the old hunters, Healing Church or otherwise, rarely ever saw Ludwig's Holy Blade. And I don't mean the imitation made by the workshop heretics and the workshop hunters. I mean the form of Ludwig that was the Holy Blade itself. Now, it might start to get a bit confusing here because we have Ludwig, the Holy Blade, as his title, as referenced in the boss fight, and then we have the Holy Sword of Moonlight as well. So just to make it easier, I'll always refer to Ludwig as the Holy Blade, and then I'll always use the word Moonlight in referring to the Moonlight Greatsword. So Ludwig, the Holy Blade, was created through obtaining the Moonlight Greatsword, and because he obtained this item, something within it, some arcane property, started to speak to him. It's very unclear what this arcane entity was that was speaking to him, but Ludwig says himself that there were little white flickers, or flickers of light, and strings of light that he could see, and he even asks if we can see it ourselves. But it's not just sight, he also asks if we can hear them, so we have to wonder what exactly can we both see and hear in the way of an arcane property. It has to be a kin or a great one that was speaking to Ludwig. I believe somewhere it states that Ludwig could see little beings of light when peering into the greatsword's essence when he closed his eyes, so it could either be that the celestial emissary or the celestials were speaking to him, or that it was a form of Kos, who we learn is the mother of all kin. One other thing that we can take away from Ludwig's dialogue, and also what he drops when defeated, which is the guidance rune, is that he talks about being guided by the Holy Moonlight Sword, and whatever essence lies within it. So this either means one of two things. Ludwig was so thankful to this essence that lies within the sword that was speaking to him for giving him this newfound power with the Holy Moonlight Sword, or he was being controlled by whatever was within the sword itself that was giving him this guidance. Either way though, it was this essence within the sword that gave him guidance, which led Ludwig to become the Holy Blade. And one other thing to note about the Holy Moonlight Sword is what Ludwig says about it in the midway point of his boss fight. Ludwig himself speaks to the sword, saying, "My true mentor, my guiding moonlight," as if the sword was alive. But even though it was his guidance and his mentor, it could not stop him from becoming the beast that he did. And that is because Ludwig was just as susceptible to the Scourge as anyone. But also, the question has to be asked, if he got the Holy Moonlight Sword when he was alive and became a hunter drunk with blood to end up in the hunter's nightmare, was this guidance of his mentor, truly leading him down a righteous path? Or was he leading Ludwig to become this beast all along? So to finish up with Ludwig, we're just going to talk about the description of both Ludwig's Holy Blade and the Holy Moonlight Sword, just to compare the differences the two have. So, an arcane sword discovered long ago by Ludwig. When blue moonlight dances around the sword and it channels the abyssal cosmos, its great blade will hurl a shadowy light wave. The Holy Moonlight Sword is synonymous with Ludwig, the Holy Blade, but few have ever set eyes on the Great Blade, and whatever guidance it has to offer, it seems to be of a very private, elusive sort. So this definitely tells us that Ludwig had a very good reason for keeping this blade a secret, to most people anyway. Whether the blade itself was telling him to keep it a secret, or he was doing it himself, is unknown, but that's all we really get from this weapon. So let's take a look at Ludwig's Holy Blade and see the difference. Okay, so Ludwig's Holy Blade, a trick weapon typically used by Healing Church hunters. It is said that the silver sword was employed by Ludwig, the first hunter of the church. When transformed, it combines with its sheath to form a greatsword. The Healing Church workshop began with Ludwig and departed from old German's techniques to provide hunters with the means to hunt more terrifying beasts, and perhaps things still worse. So it states right there that it's only said to have been wielded by Ludwig, but it doesn't say specifically that he ever used it himself. It just says that the Healing Church workshop began with Ludwig, and now through obtaining the Holy Moonlight Sword, we know that this sword, the Holy Blade, was only a recreation of the Moonlight Greatsword by the workshop that Ludwig founded. So now that that's been discussed, let's get back to the DLC itself and go back to where we left off from last time. And we're going to meet this hunter again that we met before the shortcut to the first lantern, And I should probably tell you now that this guy is called the Harrowed Hunter, but his true name may in fact be Simon, because we find a hunter later on in late DLC that is wearing the exact same garb that passes away, and he gives us the weapon known as Simon's Bowblade. So this is him here.
A tragic figure, but he will shame himself no longer. He died with his ideals untarnished. He was a true hero, and earned that much at least.
So here, he's obviously pointing at Ludwig's head and talking about him, so it seems as if Ludwig was true to himself and to the church all the way to the end.
Do you know why the hunters are drawn to this nightmare? Because it sprouted from their very misdeeds. Things that some would rather keep secret. A pitiful tale of petty arrogance, really. High time someone exposed the whole charade. Now, go on ahead. You seek nightmares and the secrets within, do you not? Now you seek...
What Simon kind of omits here is that this nightmare isn't just about the hunters, or the repentance of the hunters, and the recompense that they are being dealt. It's also about everyone that the Healing Church and Bergenworth affected, and the revenge of those affected by those parties.
Shrouded by night but with steady stride, colored by blood but always clear of mind, proud hunter of the church, beasts are a curse and a curse is a shackle. Only ye, the true blades of the church.
So this person is known as Old Hunter Yamamura, and the place we're in seems to be a prison that was used by the Healing Church. My best guess is that they used this prison to capture the hunters that were becoming a problem and were getting in the way of what the Healing Church was trying to accomplish, as we also see with Brador later on, who was a Healing Church assassin. Now, I don't know if Brador was hired by the Healing Church or whether he was a rogue assassin that was once a Healing Church member, but Brador's testimony, the item that he wears, says that he hid himself down in this prison, and the only reason I think he would have for doing this is because he knew too much about the Healing Church, and the two choices he may have had after his duties were complete were either to lock himself away or to be killed. But even though he's been imprisoned, he still invades the worlds of other hunters to assassinate them, and it seems as if he's still carrying out his duties as the assassin of the Healing Church, even when he is imprisoned. It's actually kind of similar to Navlan from Dark Souls 2. I mean, even if you don't let him out, he will still invade you, and he's actually a pretty tough NPC to beat, so I'd be careful when trying to confront him. Anyway, Brador is a pretty interesting new addition to the game, and we'll get into his lore a bit later on when we can actually get his items, and also when we get invaded by him so we can see the weapon that he uses. His weapon is called the Bloodletter, and some of you may remember this as being the name of a boss as well, the Bloodletting Beast, which a lot of people believe to be Lawrence's mangled corpse. It seems as if Brador, in theory anyway, was the one to undo Lawrence in the waking world. So Brador, being an assassin, was sent to kill a transformed Lawrence in the real world, and they both now exist within the nightmare because of the amount of blood they consumed in the waking world. So I guess in this theory, both Brador and Lawrence were blood drunk, and that is why they are here. Also, while I'm talking about the blood drunk hunters, I should probably go into the description of the Eye of a Blood Drunk Hunter, since I don't actually go into it when I'm playing the DLC. So I'll put a picture of the description up on screen right now, and we'll go through the lore of it together. The Eye of a Blood Drunk Hunter. Its pupil is collapsed and turned to mush, indicating the onset of the Scourge of Beasts. A hunter who goes drunk with blood is said to be taken by the nightmare, destined to wander forever, engaged in an endless hunt. It is a fate that no hunter can escape. So that pretty much just covers what I've already talked about previous anyway. But here we have a new interesting item called the Fist of Gratia, or the Fist of Gratia. And I go into the description in a second to see what it's about, but it's about a new hunter that we haven't yet heard of called Gratia. And I'm guessing that the corpse we just picked it up off was her, because the Fist of Gratia states she was quite a burly and sturdy hunter, and that corpse we picked it up off is bigger than most that we've seen. So it's an offhand item that you use to stagger your opponents. A chunk of iron fitted with finger holes. The hulking hunter woman, Simple Gratia, ever hopeless when handling hunter firearms, preferred to knock the lights out of beasts with this hunk of iron, which incidentally caused heavy stagger. Gratia was a fearsome hunter, and to onlookers, her unrelenting pummeling appeared oddly heroic. No wonder this weapon has later assumed her name. So yeah, the corpse that we picked it off was fucking huge, so we can only assume that that corpse was her dead body. And to add to this, she was also locked up in here, like old hunter Yamamura and Brador, so she must have had some giant significance to the Healing Church. Maybe she knew too much, like old Yamamura does, or Brador, or maybe it was something else altogether, but she was hunched over in a praying position when she died, so she was obviously praying for either forgiveness or to get out of this cell or something along those lines. But even though she wound up here, in her time, it seems as if she was a hunter of high renown, and that's all we can really take away from one item that gives us lore on her. But here, we find ourselves in the Grand Cathedral, or one of the Grand Cathedrals that are in this nightmare. And in my opinion, this is the true Grand Cathedral because this one is the point of progression for the game. It leads to the Research Hall and the Astral Clock Tower, and later on it will also lead us to the Upper Cathedral Ward portion of the DLC and the Lumen Ward. This Grand Cathedral even has people praying within it to push even further the point that this is a true place of worship. And there I just got fucking blindsided completely. I had no idea that was coming, and this ambush is really good. Like, it's a simple ambush, it's just two enemies, but it's really well thought out. Like, they draw you in with that priest praying at the altar, and they make you think it's an NPC that you can interact to and talk with. But no, you end up getting completely blindsided by this Healing Church hunter that comes in from the right. And also, judging from the beds that we see up in the area above, there must have been people that were being treated for the Scourge of the Beast. Either that, or they were doing blood transfusions up in this Grand Cathedral for the blood saints that we will learn about later on. Once we get to the Research Hall, even though the Research Hall is pretty light on lore, we should start to understand a lot better what they were doing here in the Healing Church and also in Byrgenwerth. And this fight goes on for fucking forever. It goes on for like 5 minutes or so, so I'm just gonna fast forward it so we don't have to deal with watching all of it because it's just back and forth between me and this Healing Church hunter. One thing they have done in the DLC, and I don't know if this is just because I'm in New Game Plus, is that they've given the NPCs a lot more HP. And I don't mean a lot as in compared to bosses and stuff, I just mean a lot for NPC hunters. Like, usually they would take about 10 or so hits and then they would die from Ludwig's Holy Blade at plus 10. But it seems now that they have like 10k worth of HP, and that is a shit ton of HP for one enemy to have. So now that those hunters have been dealt with, we can safely approach the altar. And this altar is actually really, really interesting. Like, it even has a hidden meaning in it, which is to do with that beast hiding under the table. So first things first, we have to get an item to place in the altar, and that item allows this altar to act as an elevator that takes us up to the Research Hall. But for now, I'm just going to talk about why I find this altar really interesting. When I was doing live comm, I kind of explained it the best I could, but now I have time to clean up what I was talking about in post-commentary. So as we see here, Byrgenwerth scholars are doing a ritual on this body. And this body kind of looks a bit like a Thumerian, but I'm guessing that it's just a normal corpse of a human. And the top of the skull has a crack in it, and I'm guessing this is to signify that they were taking the eyes out of people's brains to do this ritual. And this is even signified in the thing that activates this altar. We give this corpse eyes. We place a key item in its skull that has an eye on it to give it back the eyes that could have been taken from it. But that's not even the biggest thing about this statue. The biggest thing is what hides underneath it, this small beast that peeks its nose out from under the sheets. And I think this is to signify that whatever the Byrgenwerth scholars were doing or whatever is going on in this statue here, is to signify that they caused the onset of the Scourge of the Beast. And I mean, we already know that, but this imagery just goes even further to confirm that fact. We find out a bit later on in the end portions of the DLC that there is even more to know about what happened to do with the Scourge of the Beast and how it was first created and how it originated. But I'll save that for later when we get some dialogue on it, and that'll be around the area that is called the Fishing Hamlet. It'll be after the clock tower, and it's got some really interesting stuff in it to talk about. So I'll save that for then, because then we'll be close to the end of the DLC, and there will be more stuff to talk about to do with Kin and Kos, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that we are missing right now. So when the pieces all fall in place, we'll get to that then. But just one thing to note, how cool were those rats when I turned around and you can like see their glowing yellow eyes in the darkness. Like, there are other rats in this game, but you can't notice them like that in any other area of the game except for this one, when it's like pitch dark and their eyes are just glowing at you from the distance. I thought that was like a really, really cool effect, and it was it added so much to the atmosphere. And oh man, I wish that like more enemies could be like that in the game, like have that atmospheric feel, because I was walking up to it not knowing what to expect. I thought they were basilisks from Dark Souls 1 with those big yellow eyes. But anyway, this is our first meeting with Brador.
Are you a hunter? Well, that's very odd. Do you hear the toll of the bell?
Okay, so once again, this was a blind playthrough. I had no idea what he was talking about, but you should say that you hear nothing, because those that hear the bell are condemned to hunt for all eternity. At least to my understanding. It might be the other way around.
Liar. Such pettiness will be your undoing. The beast you seek will not be found here. Go back to your hunt. And if you have the chance, put this night behind you. Places better left untouched. Secrets better left alone. Only a fool would so brazenly roam.
You can't actually unlock this door to Brador until you're close to the end of the DLC, because there's a key you need to pick up that I'm pretty sure is in the Fishing Hamlet, or it's given to you by Simon when he dies, I believe. But right now you can't open it at all, and you just keep getting the same dialogue like this if you repeat his talk option over and over again. And I'm not sure what happens if you choose the second option, the option where you say you hear nothing. I'm not sure if he'll still invade you in your world, but I'm guessing that he probably still does, because that's the only way you can get his armor set, and it's the only way you can get Brador's testimony, which actually gives you the most lore on him out of all of his pieces of armor. But anyway, we'll get back to Brador eventually towards the end of the DLC. As of right now in the DLC, when I was playing with live commentary, I was having a lot of trouble trying to figure out where to go, and it turns out that you have to go up to where that flaming cleric beast is and grab an item out of his hand, and that item allows you to progress. But for now, as you can see, I don't have the item required to progress, so I'm just going to cut quickly to getting that item and then being back here, so we waste no time at all. We'll just streamline everything so we can carry on with the rest of the DLC. And here I was really hesitant about going up to this enemy, because yeah, he does activate later on, but you need another item altogether to activate this boss fight. I could not have been the only one that was thinking that this boss was going to activate when I got like to a certain distance away from it. I mean, it just has that feeling like in your gut that something isn't right, and like you can't just get this item for free without any consequence. But I think that was a bit of a fault on From Software's part. Like, I didn't grab this thing immediately because I assumed this would be a boss fight, like straight up. I would take the item and then the boss fight would start. And that was the only reason I didn't get it when I first saw it, because I didn't think I was ready for this boss. And this was the whole reason for where I had confusion on where to go. I thought if I came up here, there would be no going back until I defeated the boss, so there had to be another way to progress forward, but it turns out that it was this item. So let's have a little read about it. the eye pendant. An eye pendant which unlocks the surgery altar. There are 2 cathedrals in the Hunter's Dream. One lies past the River of Blood, and another contains the private research hall of the Healing Church. Only chosen members of the Healing Church or their lamentable patients can enter the research hall using this eye. Grants eyes to the surgery altar skull. So it's good that this item that is needed to progress actually tells you where and how to use it. Like, I would have had no idea where to go if I wasn't using either a guide or if I went to get that item and picked it up and it said nothing. I would have no idea on how to progress. So it's good that they kind of tell you straight up that it grants eyes to the altar. Alright, so welcome to the Research Hall. This place is apparently Byrgenwerth's most guarded secret because this is where they did their most abominable experiments, but it goes even further than that and even suggests in a way that those captive in this research hall that were experimented upon, as we'll see in a second with that creature over there, had a sort of Stockholm syndrome. And for those that don't know what that is, that's basically when you side with your captors. And it seems as if these creatures, or the ones that were experimented upon, had sided with Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, or at least they were looking up to her as a sort of idol, and they praised her name, as we'll see when we talk to the rest of those NPCs that we find in this location. But as for what they were trying to do here, and they being the Healing Church and Byrgenwerth, it almost looks like they were trying to create celestial beings, as we'll see later on in the Living Failures boss fight, because the Living Failures boss looks almost exactly like the Celestial Emissary boss from the main part of Bloodborne. We'll get back to that in a second though, because we're about to get some dialogue from this experimentation down here.
Has someone, anyone, seen my eye? I am afraid I've dropped them in a puddle. Everything's...
Okay, so what we can get from this, or what we can conclude from this, is that the experiments they may have been doing here were to do with insight. And we know that's a big part of Byrgenwerth's philosophy. And this could mean that they were doing experiments on these people to try and give them insight, or to try and get them to grow eyes on the inside, like many great ones have, thus trying to create a great one. But then it seems as if they took those eyes away from these experimentations, and that is why they are endlessly looking for them within this research hall. I don't know what the reason would be for them taking the eyes away from these experimentations. I suppose it would just be because they wanted to gain as much insight as possible, so they experimented on these creatures, or what used to be humans, and then they took the eyes that these people had gained away from them to aid them in their own personal conquests. I haven't gotten into the lore of this place very heavily yet, and I may later on in future videos when I do a different playthrough of Bloodborne, maybe an in-depth run a lot later on down the line. But the way I see this place right now is a bit like a farm. They were farming insight in the research hall. They were experimenting on these people, forcing them to gain insight, and then taking that insight away for their own personal benefit. And this could have even been how the leftover Byrgenwerth scholars created the One Reborn. But don't quote me on that, because I have no idea how the One Reborn was actually created. That's just a really bad guess. The way it seems like it was created was just through an amalgamation of experiments on insight, on great ones, on what have you, whatever Byrgenwerth was doing at the time. And I have no ideas on how or what the true experiment to create the One Reborn actually was. So we'll revisit that at another time. For now, we'll go back to what I was talking about before, about the Celestial Emissary and the Celestial Beings. So the Living Failures boss is very, very similar to the Celestial Emissary fight. So the Celestial Emissary is obviously the true form of what they were trying to achieve here in the Research Hall. The Living Failures boss fight serves as a way to show us that they were trying to either do one of two things: recreate the Celestial Emissary, and the Living Failures just served as a failure in that path to recreation, or the second option, which is that Byrgenwerth was responsible for creating the Celestial Emissary and the Celestial Beings. But I think the first option is more likely here in this case, because we all know that Byrgenwerth wasn't very good at creating their own Great Ones, and most of them went insane from trying to do so. The only quote-unquote Great One they ever achieved in creation was the One Reborn, and that wasn't even a true Great One. That was just a cocktail of experiments formed into a giant monster. So from that observation alone, I think we can conclude that the Celestial Emissary and the Celestial Beings are definitely not of this world, and they are in fact Great Ones and kin that were not created by Byrgenwerth. Although it seems as if the Celestial Emissary was definitely what led Byrgenwerth to create the Living Failures, and it seems as if it's what they were trying to do here in the Research Hall as well. As we can see with the giant heads that these experimentations have, they look very, very similar to the Celestial Beings. So they were obviously trying to recreate those. And it also gets a bit more interesting if we look at the Celestial Emissary's name and define it. So an emissary is a person sent as a diplomatic representative on a special mission, sort of like an ambassador. So the Celestial Emissary was sent to Earth by something. It was sent to Yharnam, or not Earth, sorry. It was sent to Yharnam by some force, or maybe itself. Maybe it sent itself on this mission to try and achieve a diplomatic resolution with the people of Yharnam. It's unclear as to what it could have been sent by, but seeing as Kos is the mother of all kin, it would make sense for Kos to have sent the Celestial Emissary to achieve that diplomatic resolution. And it seems to have failed, because as we saw, the Celestial Emissary was almost kind of imprisoned. I don't want to say imprisoned, but it was in the Lumenwood Garden of Upper Cathedral Ward, and I have no idea why it would have stayed there. Maybe the diplomatic resolution didn't fail, and it actually gave Byrgenwerth some secrets on the cosmos and on Great Ones and kin, and maybe that's what led Byrgenwerth to try and recreate the Celestial Emissary. That would kind of make a bit more sense to me, and that's why it may have stayed in the Lumenwood as a docile sort of figure until we attacked it. But then again, the Research Hall does not give us many answers. If you want answers from the Research Hall, you kind of have to look at the visual storytelling going on here. But even then, there still isn't much. All that we can really take away is that these creatures and these experiments look very similar to the Celestial Beings, and I know that I've already said this like 3 times, but it's so obvious that they were trying to create something here, and through the Living Failures, we can see that that was very similar to the Celestials. And now that I think about it, the appearance of the Celestial Emissary, if it was there to be diplomatic, and that you could actually commune with it through carol runes or what have you, then it could have been the Celestial Emissary that led to the creation of the choir, because the choir's purpose was basically to commune with Great Ones. And by the looks of it, in the Old Hunters DLC anyway, the choir didn't exactly exist back when this was all going on. So I think the Living Failures boss fight could have been a first step to the creation of the choir. So I think the Celestial Emissary could have appeared. They sort of took that appearance and that greeting as proof that the knowledge of how to create Great Ones and Celestials was indeed out there somewhere. And therefore it would make sense that the creation of the choir and the inception of that idea was to commune with those celestial beings and those Great Ones that could give them the knowledge they needed to create their own celestial beings and Great Ones. But here's where a kind of stick in the mud comes in, and it kind of throws this theory off track a little. So if the Celestial Emissary came down to them for no reason, just to give them some sort of knowledge or what have you, it doesn't really make sense. So I kind of think that the Celestial Emissary came after they started doing experiments on Great Ones and etc., because then that would give the Celestials and the Great Ones a reason to say, hey, look, you need to stop what you're doing, or at least you need to stop fucking around with the Great Ones, and you need to stop trying to talk to us so often, because it's annoying the shit out of us. And if we go back to like Lovecraftian lore and the old ones from that literature, then we can start to see the similarities and also the motives of those Great Ones and the Old Ones, both from the two different pieces of lore, so Lovecraftian lore and Bloodborne lore. And the Lovecraftian lore obviously inspired Miyazaki to create the Great Ones in this game. And my guess is that they have the same motives as they did in Lovecraftian lore, which is almost no motives. They don't care what happens in the waking world or the real world in general. They don't care what humans really do unless it directly involves them in some way. So if we believe that the Great Ones in this game have the same motives as the old ones from the Lovecraft lore, then it could be that Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church were fucking so many things up for the Celestials and the Great Ones in what they were doing with these experiments.
Kill me. Please. Just kill me. Free me from this place before I go mad.
Okay, so I'll get to these guys in a second, but what I was saying was that the Healing Church and Byrgenwerth were fucking so many things up for the Celestials and the Great Ones in the way of their experiments that possibly Kos had to send an emissary to Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church to try and reach this diplomatic resolution, but it seems as if they were unable to, and this is what caused so many things to go wrong.
Lady Maria, please take my hand. Please help me. Don't let me drown.
Alright, so I've kind of reached my peak on what I can talk about to do with the Celestials and what's going on in the research hall in general, but this is the first mention we really hear of Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, the final boss of this area. I'm going to cover Lady Maria's lore, or at least the lore that I know about her, at this point, because for the boss fight, I just want to sit back and let you guys enjoy the OST and the soundtrack to her boss fight and how intense it is, because honestly, talking over that boss fight is sacrilege. It is one of the most amazing boss fights in this game, and this DLC has added so many great things, and I feel like talking over the Ludwig boss fight was really kind of a bad thing, because that soundtrack is probably my favorite thing in this DLC. Like, it's just one of the most epic soundtracks to a boss that I've ever heard. And I don't use that word lightly. So, in that case, for the Lady Maria boss fight, there won't be any commentary in it whatsoever. You guys can just sit back and enjoy the boss fight as is. So that means we'll get to talking about her lore right now before we head up to that boss. First of all, Lady Maria is a distant relative, or at least a relative. I'm not sure if it says distant, but she is a relative to one of the Vileblood Queens of Cainhurst. I can't recall if that Vileblood Queen is Annalise, but it is a Vileblood Queen nonetheless. Secondly, because of the attire she wears, we can guess that she was once a knight of Cainhurst Castle, and left to become a hunter of the church. I'm only saying that she left to become a hunter of the church because she wound up here, basically working for those at Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church. I'm not sure if she was actually working for them, but the location that she's in and the context surrounding her at the moment makes it seem as if she was. So if she wasn't already a good swordsman when she left Cainhurst, she was after she became Gehrman's apprentice. Gehrman took Lady Maria up as his student, and she fastly became one of his greatest allies. It seems as if Gehrman developed a very fond appreciation for Lady Maria, as this is most evident in the doll in the dream. So when we get to Lady Maria, probably one of the first things you'll notice is that she has the same voice actress as Doll, and she looks exactly the same as the pale doll from the dream. And this is because they are meant to be the same person. Not exactly the same, like they're not meant to be literally the same person, as they aren't, but Gehrman created this doll in a way to soothe his lonesome from the death of Lady Maria. But it seems as if there's more going on with this relationship, the master and student relationship, than is initially being led on by the game. It seems as if there may have been some perverted fascination that Gurman had with Lady Maria, and this led him to create the doll in the dream as a way to cope with her loss. But anyway, enough about the doll, back to Lady Maria. So, Lady Maria wields the weapon called the Ryuko. Lady Maria wasn't fond of blood magic, or the magic used by those at Canehurst to create blood weapons. And in fact, it actually disgusted her. And that may have actually been why she left Canehurst. Maybe because the strength of blood magic and the potency of it in Canehurst was so strong, and she just couldn't take it anymore, so she had to leave, and she had to be rid of that type of magic and those type of weapons. But the weapon that Lady Maria wields, the Ryuko, is not a blood weapon, or so it says in its description, but in the boss fight, we see her using blood magic when she uses her weapon in the second phase. So the question has to be asked, is it truly not a blood magic weapon? Because if it truly is a blood weapon in some way, that may be the reason that she could stomach it no longer, as it says in its description. It says that at some point in Lady Maria's life, she cast her beloved Ryuko into a dark well when she could stomach it no longer. And the only reason I see for her doing this is that it was... oh, wait for it. Yeah. These things, oh, they're like the things from Dark Souls 1, the kind of sludge enemies in the depths. Oh god, I hate those things. These things are a bit more bearable because you know where they come from, but I did not expect that one. But yeah, anyway, the only reason I can think of for her throwing it away, or throwing away her most beloved weapon, is because she shared the same distaste for both blood weapons and the Ryuko. But I'll have to hold that thought for a second because we're about to read something on these big heads. So, an enlarged head of a patient of the Cathedral, with a cavity that just happens to fit a human head, although one would be mad to try it on. But if you do, listen carefully for the sticky sound, drip drop, as water seeping up from the depths, slowly, steadily. So, many questions raised by this item. For one, what are the depths that this item speaks about, and what is the water or the liquid that it speaks about as well? The only places in the game that really have water are the area where Rom, the vacuous spider, is found, Ebritas's chamber, along with the fishing hamlet and the Forgotten Woods. But the only place that I see really having relevance to that line of lore is probably the fishing hamlet, because that is where Kos resides. And also not to mention that the fishing hamlet is the area that is guarded by Bergenworth. So, I mean, it could be the place that the squishy heads, or the big heads, whatever you want to call them, are kind of hearing and seeing within their own minds. But then again, these depths and this water that they speak of in this line of lore could just be an area that we have never heard of. It could be just a fallacy, like a place that doesn't even exist except for within the minds of those in this location that are afflicted. The dripping water and these depths could just be these experimentations' perception of something else entirely that we may not even assume exists. This dripping water may in fact be the speech of a great one. We don't quite know. Maybe that's how Kos communicates to people. Maybe it's through the sound of dripping water. I have no idea what it could be, but it doesn't mean that it's a location or the sound of the dripping water is something that we have seen or heard before within the game. There are so many obscure things in Bloodborne, and this like dripping water and these depths and the idea of these big heads and what they have to say is just another thing that we can add to the list of things we may never understand in Bloodborne. We can speculate all we want and theorize about what it could be, but we'll never have a solid understanding, really, of what they're talking about, because there's so many things that we could link it to.
Save me, please. I don't hear anything. Oh, save me.
So, something we can take away from that dialogue right there is something quite interesting. So if you don't hear the sound of the water, then it means that you're a failure or you're too far gone, and nothing can really help you to hear that water if you don't already hear it. So the sound of that water must be something very, very important, and I mean, there's not really much else we can take away from it. We're about to meet someone new in a second, but I still don't really have any ideas on what it could be. Anyway, here is Adeline.
Is that you, Lady Maria? No. You're someone else. Please, I need brain fluid. Murky. Please, I need...
Okay, so this person's name is Adeline, and she requires us to get brain fluid for her to complete her questline. To complete her story fully, you need to bring her brain fluid 3 times. One interesting thing to note is that the brain fluid may in fact be the water that they are talking about. Like I said, it could be many things, just one of these things could be brain fluid. And I'm saying this because when we first bring her brain fluid, she says she can hear the sound of the water again, or she can hear the sticky sound of the plop and the drip. Whereas right now, she can't hear anything at all, and that is causing her to slowly die, I assume. Or at the very least, I assume it's causing her to go slowly insane. But when we start giving her brain fluid, she actually turns more insane when we give her it rather than when we don't. Her demeanor completely changes, and the tone of what she's talking about and how she talks about it is just super crazy, and it's a lot more insane than how she is now. So my guess is that the things here, these experimentations, have a sort of addiction, an addiction to brain fluid, and if they don't feed that addiction, they will slowly go mad and eventually feral like this one here. So it seems as if Adeline has been kind of a more successful experiment than most of these, and she still has her sanity somewhat intact and has a bit of brain fluid left in her system, but she requires us to go find more for her so she can feed and satiate that addiction she has for brain fluid. And I do complete her quest in this playthrough, and I have the footage of it, so that was lucky that that didn't get erased. But something very strange happens towards the end of her quest line, and her head actually ends up falling off. Her giant head falls straight off her body, and she becomes a giant blob. So it seems as if too much brain fluid turns an experiment in this location into one of those giant blobs we saw earlier that fell on me and tried to suck the life out of me. And it seems as if that thing that fell on my head earlier, that giant blob, was trying to suck the brain fluid right out of my head. And we're about to get some more dialogue about this in a second from someone over here. So we'll talk a bit more about these giant blobs and this brain fluid addiction in just a second.
Listen close, and you too will hear the sound of water. Listen.
So from what I've gathered, the ones that still have a sort of humanoid appearance and these giant blob heads but can hear the water have brain fluid still within them. So they're still somewhat coherent and they're still somewhat sane in a way. Like they won't attack you violently, but they're too far gone mentally. And we're also about to get some brain fluid off of a giant blob up here in a second. And unfortunately, I don't read the description of the brain fluid, so I'm going to put up the description on screen, and once again we'll read through it together so we can find out what it's all about. It has some very, very interesting lore. Everything from what the plip-plop sound kind of is, like it tells us what it is or what it could be or where it originated, but it also tells us about the Eldritch truth, and we're about to get it right now from this blob here. So the description of brain fluid states, greyish amoeba-shaped brain fluid wobbles and bounces, extracted from a patient whose head expanded until that was all they were. In the early days of the healing church, the great ones were linked to the ocean, and so the cerebral patients would imbibe water and listen to the howl of the sea. Brain fluid writhed inside the head, the initial makings of internal eyes. Once a young girl had an older brother who was determined to become a doctor, and so she willfully became his patient. In the end, this led to their encounter with the Eldritch Truth, for which they considered themselves blessed. We fail to realize our own latent potential until the moment it is lost, and we sense its absence. Ironically, this is the very nature of insight, like the moment one licks one's own blood, only to be startled by its sweetness. Okay, so a lot of interesting stuff here. For one, we already knew that the Great Ones were linked to the ocean because of the lake runes. So yeah, that's kind of already been discussed in a lot of other different lore videos and all that stuff. I've just forgotten to mention it up to this point because I actually didn't remember that the lake runes were a thing up until right now. So the Great Ones are linked to the ocean, and we know that that's especially the case with Rom and the Moonside Lake. So yeah, I was kind of right in assuming that the dripping water sound was almost a way that the Great Ones can communicate with those that have been afflicted, because that is the sound of the ocean, and the ocean is linked to the Great Ones. The next thing we find out is that the brain fluid that these people were injected with was the cause for the creation of insight and eyes on the brain. So those injected with brain fluid and those that can hear the sound of this dripping water can more easily gain insight. That is basically what's been established in this line of lore. The next thing this item talks about is the fact that there was once a young girl who had a brother who dreamed of becoming a doctor, and their efforts led them to the findings of the Eldritch Truth. Now, my guess is that this boy, or this man that wanted to become a doctor, eventually became Rom the Vacuous Spider, because it says he was led to the Eldritch Truth, which is believed to be a communion with the Great Ones to learn the truth of the cosmos. And thus, the Great Ones may have actually turned him into Kin himself. I'm unsure of who his sister could have been, because we have quite a few possibilities. It could have been Adeline, the lady that is currently asking us for brain fluid, and that may have been why she was a successful patient. Or the sister could have been Rom the Vacuous Spider, and the brother may have been Master Willem, and then that could be the explanation for why Master Willem was watching over Rom the Vacuous Spider and the Moonside Lake. Also, just wait. Oh my god, this... Plip plop, plip plop, plip plop, and splat. I do not think there could have been a better subtitle for that happening to that NPC. That was great timing there. Also, if you can't tell, these giant blobs are where you get the brain fluid, and also a bit of dialogue.
Lady Maria, I'm a robin. Will I ever curl up and become an egg? What say you? Lady Maria. Lady Maria, say something. Anything. Lady Maria, will I... What say something?
So, once they become this, they cannot die. Once they become these giant malformed blobs, they literally cannot be killed, like, at all. They're immortal now that they've become this giant blob. And we get a bit more context on Lady Maria here, so it seems as if she was definitely a guardian or a sentinel to these experiments down in the research hall. And she acts like a sort of mother towards them almost, because they look up to her like a maternal figure, and they call out her name, and they want her to respond by any means. So it seems as if, at least when Maria was alive, or within the waking world, or something along those lines when this was going down, that she would take care of these subjects, and she would treat them like they were family almost in some way. Whether that was just out of pity or curiosity, it's completely unknown, but Maria definitely had an impact on these people, and she now guards the entrance to the fishing hamlet. So there's a lot more mysteries that we'll have to go through, especially in the next episode when we get to the bigger questions like Kos, the orphan of Kos, the fishing hamlet, what have you. There's so much shit left to talk about, it's not even funny, and Maria is just one small part of that mystery. But here we've just picked up some new equipment, so I'm just going to go ahead and read through their descriptions. So, decorative old hunter garb. Old hunter garb decorated with brass trinkets. At the time, some hunters believed that certain metals would ward off beast blood. On a night of the hunt, it is no wonder that people would resort to superstition. So they both say the same thing, but this is just an alternative costume to the old hunter's garb, and I don't have the other items for that. So I'm going to read the description to the original Old Hunter's garb, and we're going to compare what's a bit different. So, Old Hunter garb. One day the hunters disappeared, and Yharnamites began to whisper of the hunter's sin. Drunk with blood, chasing after beasts, they would pass on to the nightmare, every last one of them. So, the hunters apparently did something pretty fucked up, because it seems to be called a sin.
Blip, blop, blip, blop. Splish, splash, splish, splash. Blip, blop, blip, blop.
So, for the record, I think it's fair enough to just call these guys ploppers, because, I mean, they say the word enough already. And out here, while I was playing through on live commentary, I just took a moment to notice that these barristers look incredibly similar to the ones from Anor Londo, so I just thought of this place as like a dark Anor Londo, pretty much. I mean, you don't get to see it from the outside, but, I mean, those archways look incredibly similar, and we know that they like that type of architecture a lot in this series, and Miyazaki is especially fond of it. But also, can anyone tell me what the hell was up with that flower plopper? Because that, I don't know if it was a special type of enemy or what it was, but there had to be some significance to it. Like, he is the only one that was near a sunflower. But speaking of the sunflowers, we're about to see through this door where he got it from. Welcome to the Living Failures boss fight. Now, this place, I'm pretty sure, is a part of the Lumen Wood, and the Lumen Wood is also the part in Upper Cathedral Ward, and I'm pretty sure it's down below where we are right now. So, as you can see, these things are giant malformed versions of the Celestials, and man, they fucked up trying to create, like, I'm not sure if they were trying to create the Celestials or trying to recreate them, but they done fucked up somehow. And this is what we get. But let's talk about the giant sunflower in the middle of the arena for a second. So it seems to be alive, and it seems to be sort of the heart of the Lumen Wood. And I'm thinking that it's the cause for the Celestials still being here, or it attracts them to that location. I don't know what it could be or what it is, or even its purpose for that matter, but it has to be incredibly significant. Like, I thought it was initially the boss when I first walked into this arena. I didn't realize I'd be fighting copy-pastes of the, well, an uglier version of the Celestial Emissary. I do have to say, though, I do think this boss is a lot more interesting than the Celestial Emissary, though. Like, these things use Arcane, just like the Celestial Emissary does, so they were kind of close to recreating the Celestial Emissary, but still, these are failures nonetheless, no matter how close they got. If you do have any ideas on what that giant sunflower could represent, or what its purpose could be, definitely let me know in the comments, because I'm really interested in any ideas out there about its purpose, and why it is pretty much at the heart of the Lumen Wood. So we can have a bit of a chat about that in the comments below, if any of you have ideas, and then the next episode that I do, which would be probably the second last episode, but it would be tying up the main story of the DLC, I can discuss the ideas that we may have come across for this giant sunflower in that video. So yeah, just if you have any ideas on it, just put them in the comments below and we'll have a bit of a chat about it, because I have no idea what its representation could be, and I'm quite intrigued by it. But anyway, I end up failing this fight. I only kept this part in because I felt I should have just put my failures in, because, well, we're fighting the living failures, so it would be kind of wrong for me to take out my own personal failure of the boss fight. I found that would be kind of ironic if I did that. So yeah, I eat shit here, and we'll come back and kill this boss properly in just a second, but we have something else to do first.
Not a pretty sight, is it? The true face of the blood-worshipping, beast-purging, healing church. But that's not all. You seek the secrets held by the nightmare, do you not? Then here's what you must do. Climb the astral clock tower and kill Maria. She hides the real secret. Go on. She hides them.
Well, you heard Simon. We need to seek the secrets and find a way to get to Lady Maria and kill her so we can access the next part of the DLC. Now, the way to do that is just by defeating the living failures and then continuing on with the level. But before I do that, I'm just running around collecting these items that are now here. For some reason, I don't know why they're here all of a sudden, and we have a bit more dialogue from Adeline.
Please, I need brain. Oh.
It's like a Slurpee.
Oh, it's wonderful. Oh, I hear the sticky sound. Do you hear it too? Oh, I know. Will you have my blood as thanks? I'll have you know, I was once a blood saint too. That makes me happy, but I cannot move. Look, on my right arm. I'm sorry to trouble you, but you don't mind, do you?
So, we just learned that Adeline was a blood saint, and I'm pretty sure there are more blood saints in the game, I just can't remember who they are. So blood taken from Adeline, patient of the research hall, restores HP then continues to rejuvenate HP for some time. Adeline was originally one of the blood saints who received treatment by the church to cultivate worthy blood. Adeline was one of the few cases that turned out favourably. Adeline, in this case, was one of the few favourable outcomes that they got. She wasn't a success, she was just an acceptable failure.
Oh, but don't be greedy. I should know.
So we'll come back later and we'll finish off Adeline's quest. That'll be in the next episode, and we'll basically wrap up everything in the 4th episode, which will be the cleanup episode. That'll be like the last optional boss and everything else that I've missed. So we'll go for the boss again, and I'll let you guys sit back and enjoy the music. Okay, so now that the living failures have been defeated, we can gain access to the clock tower, where Lady Maria awaits. But I just take a quick trip back to the Hunter's Dream to rejuvenate my blood vials and my silver bullets. So I'll give you a rundown of the easiest strategy for beating Maria before we get in there. That is to basically just parry her every movement and every attack, because that is how you kill her quite easily. And also the atmosphere of this boss fight and the stairs, like kind of like the stairway going up, reminds me a lot of King Allant from Demon's Souls. Like, not the final version of him, the pre-final boss version of King Allant. The atmosphere is fucking incredible in this fight, and we're about to engage in Maria's opening sequence. So, here we go. Hope you enjoy this intense as fuck boss fight and its awesome music.
A corpse should be left well alone. Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will kill you now. Liberate you from your wild curiosity.
we have it. How much of a close call was some of those hits? Oh my god. I'm actually surprised that I survived and beat that boss on the first try. So, we'll continue on with the fishing hamlet next time, guys. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you all next time.